Hey, everybody, I'm Pete Bloodworth with Corrections Unfiltered, and I'm lucky to be sitting here today with Charlie Bueno. Charlie and I have known each other for a number of years. We worked at a facility together. We've been through quite a bit. I like to say that, Charlie just has this ability to get involved with the inmate population. He's able to, guide them and give them information. A lot of times there were some challenging situations. Charlie was the guy who went in, talked with the inmates, and we were able to manage a lot of different things because of the confidence and the trust that the inmates had given Charlie. So I want to take this opportunity to get to know Charlie a little bit better, talk about what was leading him up to getting a job in corrections, and we'll just kind of take the conversation from there. So Charlie, thank you for being here today. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Pete. Glad to be here. Pete, really glad to be part of the show.
So Charlie, needless to say, you started out in our first episode, you talked about how you joined corrections later on, in your career life. What was going on with you? How did you decide to try corrections? Can you kind of give us that rundown on how you got involved?
Well, I was down in Florida. Again, I thought I was ready to retire, and after I was there for a year, I decided I wasn't ready to retire in Florida. Really wasn't a place for me to spend the rest of my life. So we talked about coming back to Ohio, and again, my lovely wife, was searching the internet as she always does, just looking, employment's back up this way, and ran across the corrections. So we did a little, filled out a little online piece, sent it into them, and immediately I got a response. They wanted to interview me. But I had to fill out a packet first that was really, really, really in depth. There was a lot to it. Probably took us almost a day and a half just to fill it out. So I filled that out, sent it in. Again, they sent me a packet. We filled the packet out, sent the packet in, and immediately I got a call. They want me to interview. But it was an in-person interview. And they wanted me 4 or 5 days later. I was still in Florida. And I said, you know what? They emphasized how they wanted me. I think they were really just looking for a lot of correctional officers at that point. Facility was starting back up, but I had a good background. My driving record was good. My money was good. I had a good military background. So I flew back to Ohio. We interviewed, and they said, okay, we want you for the next class. So I think it was maybe a week later, I was standing at the gate, ready to go in.
What do you think it was that kind of lured you into corrections of all things?
Well, I've always been interested in law enforcement. Like I said, my uncle, his son, my son, my son-in-law, all in law enforcement. Some of them inside the jail, some of them out on the road. My father was a policeman, retired, and so it was just there, But I'll tell you a quick one. I tried to get into law enforcement right out of high school. Going right into high school, I tried to get into a law enforcement class, and they were like, oh, yeah, we'll take you. We're taking applications. So I tried to get into the law enforcement class. A day later, they called me and said, oh, no, the class is filled. You can't get in, So later I found out my father had called the school and said, he's not getting into that class. I don't want him in law enforcement. But I lived that life, right. My whole life I lived law enforcement. So yeah. It was kind of, I was excited about it. It would really intrigued me. So that's why I think I was more, it was more pulling me in.
So now you show up at the facility for your interview. Walk us through that, will you?
Yeah, it was, when you first look at the facility, it's enormous. It was enormous. At that point, I thought that. You go to the gate, push the button, talk to whoever's at central control, and they ask you all the questions, and that's when you They buzz you in, and you're standing there in between the two gates. The one behind you closes and clicks shut. The one in front of you opens up. And then I walked in, and as that second gate's closing, I turned around and looked. And that's when I said, either go in or go out.
So
And
what pushed you to be able to go through?
I think it was, it started to get up my curiosity after I started looking into it. And then that gate closing behind me, I was thinking, wow, I'm in here. And then I look around, you see the barbed wire, you see the electric signs on the fence, and I'm thinking, none of us could get out of here. And I just turned around and walked in. And honestly, I was taught a long time ago, walk it like you own it. And I walked through the door, and they looked. And everybody that looked at me, I made eye contact and looked right back. And it was, yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am. And I think people kind of got that vibe off me right away.
Where'd that come from?
280. That didn't.
Where'd that roll your shoulders back and walk through it? Where'd that come from?
Marine Corps.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was a lot of training, a lot of just teaching you in boot camp, and that just rolled right into the corrections, and
Gotcha.
which really benefited us.
Did it?
Benefited us. Yeah.
So you go inside, you do the interview. Did you nail it?
No, I did okay. I was, I'm not one of those. At that point, I wasn't I wasn't an off the cuff type of person. I had to think about things a little bit, and I think I probably stuttered a little my way through it, and I was totally honest. I told them the way I was. I'm not a hateful person. I ain't a meanful person. I treat people decent. I don't know how this is going to be for me, but I'm willing to give it a shot. And they just kind of like were with me with the whole thing.
So how long was it before you started to do the training, and how long was the training?
My training came fast.
Yeah.
They put a class together. I think there was 32 of us, I think, because that was, that
Wow.
facility was down, and then it reopened.
Okay.
And they were bringing the staff back up to the numbers they needed. So there was a lot of people in there from corrections already that worked there that were, they had to re-qualify and re-interview and go through all the training. And you know what? I want to say that training was 3 weeks, but I'm not really positive on how long it was.
So you entered into a class of 30 whatever, and there was mixed between new people like you and experienced people who had been there before?
Yes.
How'd that work out? How'd that work out for you?
Well, just from sitting there looking around, I was definitely the oldest. There's no doubt.
You said that. I didn't say
that. I kind of sat back in the corner, and ears open, mouth shut, and I listened, and I watched the people that came in there. And it's funny how there was 4 or 5 people that were teaching classes, because the facility taught the classes. You had captains in there, you had chiefs, the warden came in, and there was 4 or 5 people that impacted me from day one.
Oh, really?
Sure. And then there's some people that...
Why did those people impact you?
The information that they were telling you, it proved during your time working there after the class, that in the back of my mind, wow, that's exactly what they said. But you don't have to do it like that. You could do, everything they said, it just was like embedded in my brain. Then there were some people that came in there, you could tell they didn't either want to do it, they really didn't know what they were doing, and they were just kind of like going through the motions of the class. But they were, like I said, they impact on. I could tell you a handful of them that I'll never forget them from day one.
That's an important point to bring up, because as I moved on in my career and everything, I eventually got to the point where I was involved in the hiring process, either by doing the interviews or doing the training, or eventually being the warden, being the hiring person. And you're counting so much on your trainers to go in, and it's not to sell them a product, but it's to let them, give them confidence that what they're hearing is essential, and what they're hearing It's authentic. So you got two things happening there. You got the one group that are telling you the things and you're going, I have confidence in what they're saying. Then you have this other thing happening. How did you say, I'm going to stick this out? I'm going to make this work?
Well, after about a day or two, I had it in my mind that it was getting interesting. The things that they were telling you during the breaks in the class, other COs would come in and start talking to us. And I start, like I said, I'm listening, but now I got, like, there were some OGs in there, and I'm saying, okay, this guy's been behind these walls. I could tell. After I started talking to him, I said, okay, this is it. This is what I want to do. And then the conversations became more in depth, and I started dissecting what they were saying. And there were some of them that after, well, maybe 2 weeks, there was one sergeant, and he said, how long have you been doing this? And then I thought to myself, do I want to tell him, or I just want to let it just ride out? And he's still my friend. And I leveled with him from the very beginning, and he said, you need to keep it up, because I would have never guessed that just by the conversations that we had.
Okay. Can you quantify what the keep it up was? What did you need to keep up?
The positive, the being confident. And he said, just the way you sit in the chair, the way you walk.
Okay.
He said, you don't slouch, your shoulders are out. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, that was from the Marine Corps. And then he perked up and said, oh, now I know why you are the way you are. He said, you need something, I'm here. You need, we'll do it. So he said, just get through all this and get to work, and we'll connect. And we did.
So when you came out of training, and like you said, the facility's reactivating, some experienced staff going through retraining again, some experienced staff have already been there for a little bit longer than you because they've just been going on, newer staff. Where did you find they were positioning you in the facility to work? What kind of units? Where were you at in the facility, and what were you doing?
Well, most of the new COs coming in, the boots, if that's what you want to call them, they were putting us in pods. I went to a pod for one.
What's a pod?
That's the unit where all the inmates are housed. You have the left side and the right side, depending on where you're at. It's dependent on how you reference them. Then you have the common area in the center. Then you have the bubble where the officers stay. You could go in and you monitor both units from the bubble. You can talk to central control, do your computer work, or, just keep up with your watch tours or whatever. But I was in the unit for one day. We came out and we were going to the chow hall, and a code came out.
What's the code?
That's when they'll call over the radio, inmate or staffs, maybe having a medical emergency, there's a fight, or, somebody's getting assaulted, whatever the case may be. That's when you have an ERT team, the emergency response I think there was 5 of us. We would all respond to the incident along with captain, lieutenant, building sergeant, whatever, whoever's on the team. So I'm standing in the hallway, and a guy passes me by, and I said, I look at the CO. I said, I wonder what's going on. And chief ran by, and he said, don't just stand there. Come on. I said, oh, okay. We click up, and here we go. We're running. We get there, and they're fighting in the hallway. They're down on the ground, and 4 COs on him. And he said, grab a leg. So, we knew a little bit of what, just from talking to these guys, we grabbed a leg. Next thing you know, a couple of COs cuffed him up, put him on the wall, and then they pulled us away from that. From that point on, I was never in a unit. I was always out with the ERT. They paired me up with the sergeant, and they taught me the whole facility. Me and another CO. They taught us the whole facility for about 4 or 5 days. They let us shadow it. And then we went and did our unit training. So I was more climatized to the building than most people were. Then they put me in a unit. And I only worked in a unit in the pods for probably 6 months.
So what do you attribute the fact that you're a responsive person and all that, and that's what got you positioned where you were at? Do you think that that was a benefit to you to be put in the position that you were, more of a responding person there to assist others, time of distress, or just assist them in normal duties, but not working in the actual pod?
Yes, after I definitely wanted to learn the pods because that's the bread and butter of the whole facility is
Why do you say that?
the officers have to run the pods and they keep the pods in control. So I thought myself I needed to learn to control the units before I could control what's going on outside of them because you're dealing with a lot more inmates. So when they gave me the opportunity to do the ERT, I jumped on it, of course. I said,
Mhm.
absolutely. And there was not there was not one time when the call came out that I didn't respond. And when I got there, if I was the first one, I did what I had to do in the situation to control it.
I want to jump in on that real quick. When I first started out, kind of the same thing. I was fresh out of the Marine Corps. I could run and do all that neat stuff that they wanted and what they needed. And it was a pretty physically active facility. There was a lot of stuff happening at this facility I started at. And I worked in cell houses, but I kind of got same like thing like you. I kind of got put in a position where I was more of a in between guy. I maybe took the trash runs and I did like the stuff to make the facility move. And I supported the officers in the cell houses. And there was this one guy. He hated me from the day I started. He probably still hates me today, and I'm okay with that. And he used to say to me, blood work, you ain't worth a darn unless you work a cell house for 18 months. And at the time, I took offense to that. I'm like, well, I don't know. All these other people seem to think I'm doing pretty good. Now, I'm not going to say you have to put a time frame on it, 18 months. However, as I moved on in my career, I realized the true value of officers who work those cell houses. They sort of become these, like to go back the old westerns where they're walking down the street at the end of the night and they're shaking all the doors, and they're getting the people to get off the street and that kind of stuff. They just become a very good person as far as managing people, dealing with different personalities, and the vast majority of the ones that I know that spent their time in cell houses and really learned the science, the chess, so to speak, of working in the cell houses, you can really rely upon them to let you know when things don't really seem to be going right. So I didn't mean to jump into all that about me.
No,
I was just
that's
saying,
that's fine.
I noticed how, that was put upon me early, same kind of thing. I'm more of in a responding position. Got people telling me that's not the way to go later on in my career. I'm like, there's a lot of value to people who work cell houses.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, they're a lot, I think, is why a prison runs the way it does, is if you control your units, the facility is going to be a little bit more under control. I mean, there's some things that and I know that are totally out of your control. But I I've worked with several people that I watched them because we were partnered up at the time, and I watched them at the point of my partner when I thought to myself, wow, she's really good at what she does. She's really above board. But we fed off each other because she was good at certain things and I lacked a little bit, and I was better at certain things and she lacked a little bit. And we were just like hammering it. We were right on the money. We were good together. We
Yeah.
worked really well together.
That's awesome. And that is one thing I had to learn in corrections was, strengths and weaknesses. And I don't just me divulge real quick. I was working a cell house, it's pretty new, and looked in a cell. There's three guys in it, only supposed to be two. So only supposed to be two of you
Yeah.
in here, that kind of thing. And the inmates just kind of chuckled. Well, now I'm being offended. It's like, what do you mean? What are you chuckling at me for? you know,
Oh yeah,
you
yeah,
know. And
yeah.
they're like, hey man, we get it. You're enforcing the rules. We get it, man. Da da da, all that kind of stuff. But when they were talking to me, the guy stepped out and I pat searched him real quick and I was following, everything I'd been guided to do. And they started talking to me later on. They're like, well, we know that you're not this person you're trying to be. And I'm like, who are they to give me advice? Right? Who are you?
Right, right.
And they're like, we see you out there. You're out there having fun with your buddies. You're this or that. When every time you walk in the cell house, you try to act like the toughest guy in town. Well, now I'm being offended. I'm like, wait a minute. Just got out of the Marine Corps. I'm in great physical shape. I think I am pretty tough. But it's those conversations with the people who fill in your weaknesses. I went and talked to somebody, and they're like going, "Yeah, Pete, you just got to kind of figure out your prison self.
Right.
You come across a certain way just because I always had this is long hair compared to what I had then. You come off a certain way, and you now you just have to figure out how to make that work for you. So taking all those experiences you had, you're at the facility, you're working, you're in more of a response role, or that I'm doing these duties, but if something goes wrong, I go help out and support. How did your evolution go? How did you evolve? Because by the time I got there to work with you, you were the talk of the town. You were the guy that knew what was going on. The inmates confided in you. The inmates spoke to you. Like I said, if I could get 50% to follow the rules, of the 50% I couldn't get, you were going to get 30% of them. So how did you evolve?
Well, I think going into it too, I kind of made my own path. I didn't follow anybody. I didn't want anybody to follow me. They gave you certain abilities when you got there, and one of them that I really remember was the pat down. They walked in during our training. They said, you can pat down an inmate at any time. And I thought to myself, this is a great rule. And we had an incident where they had to empty the yard. Yard came out. Everybody, how they're flooding in through the door. It's supposed to be a controlled move. It's not. And I stood there in a hallway. And again, I'm a bigger fella. I said, nobody's passing without getting patted. And it was silence. Got on the radio and told them what hallway I was in and said, I got multiple inmates. We need to pat them down. All of them. And I want to say I know there were shanks found. Can't tell you exactly how many, but after a minute or two, you started to hear them hit the floor. Now they're dropping them because something was going to go down on that yard, but somebody knew about it and they cleared the yard. And ever since that time, when I was walking through that hallways, I would just randomly pat down inmates and found contraband. So they knew me. They knew me. So that started anywhere I went to. I made it known when I came into a cell house. I made it known that I was in there. I told them I was coming. I announced my presence when I was there, and I always threw on protective gloves. And after I was in the facility for a while, that's the first thing. Oh, he means business. He's throwing the gloves on. So I knew they knew who I was, and I was okay with that. But on the other hand, they gave me the counselor job, and when I went into the cell houses, they kind of knew me, and I talked to a man like he was a man until I didn't have to talk to him like that. We had to go another route, but I think they gave me the respect because I gave them the respect, and then it just kind of escalated on that. And anywhere I went to, majority of them knew me, and like I said, I was fine with that because I would sit down at tables with them and talk to them. And there was a lot of people that didn't agree with that. But when I got promoted and I went into the B1 with the step down unit that we started, which you had a big part of that, that's where the respect really came into because they knew how I was, what I expected, and I was going to do for them, what I could do for them per the prison. But they weren't getting anything extra from me, and they knew that. And
Well,
that
so
was,
I have to tell you, Charlie, one of the best moves was when you took over that transition unit or that step down unit where when people were coming out of segregation, they had to go live with you for a while. And once they were able to show that they could comply with the rules, comply with staff, then they went out to the general population unit. But if they couldn't, sometimes they stayed with you longer or whatever they did caused them to go back into the restrictive housing unit and they came back out for one more try. But what I found to be very valuable was the fact that they knew they still had to come out and see you and the way you handled yourself and everything with respect and handling them with respect, let them know that if they do the right things, you're going to get out. You do the right things. There's a process here. We're going to review you. We're going to talk to you. You'll always know what's going on. And you manage that very well. And you made a big positive impact with that facility. So considering, here you are, you joined into the corrections, you kind of moved quickly because they identified your ability to respond and take care of things, your ability to walk with pride, because if you walk with pride, I firmly believe this, even though in the back of your mind, you're going, God, I hope this goes well.
Absolutely.
If your game face is there to say, oh, it's going to go well, a lot of the staff around you who are maybe apprehensive or less experienced, maybe less confident, they're going to draw off that. And I can tell you, me personally, I saw that. I could go on and on about the different times when we faced some challenging things. And I knew that if I got you involved, not only would I get that percentage of the inmates that I had a hard time getting, but I also knew that the staff would be invested and involved. Because if Charlie Bueno was going to be there, they knew there was strength, and that made them stronger. So, have you got any, situations or anything that kind of resonate with you that kind of challenge your, like in the inside your mind, you're going, boy, I sure hope this goes well, but the outside, you're get resonating strength and confidence. What you got anything like that?
Yeah, well, going back to when you were talking about the step down unit, um, I think the way we set that whole unit up and the way we handled that in the minute by minute, hour by hour, uh, them transitioning from the segregation to the step down, and then they had to do the right things to get out of the step down segregation. And the other thing it gave me a lot of confidence there was being that I was the only one, not even the warden would let them out of the step down segregation. I was the one that let them out, and that to me was huge. But they do things in there and they get out. In the one, there was two incidents that stuck in my mind, and I could remember the inmate, but again, I don't remember the name. But I'll never forget the face. He got in. He was in the segregation unit. For the max amount you could get when you got a write up. There was an incident there. They put him in a segregation. He got out of the segregation. He was a problem while I was in there. They brought him to the step down to see what we could do with him. And I had a conversation with every step down inmate once a week. Mm-hmm. Sat down at a desk and we talked face to face. And he became just the inmate. Didn't have any problems with him. He was respectful. And he made comment, I want to get out. I want to get out of here. I want to go back to GP. So we worked on that. And I there was 4 or 5 of them that were real problems that you really had to specifically pay attention to. The other ones, they kind of knew what they had to do to get out of there. It was kind of, I don't want to say it was a game, but it kind of was. But then most of them got out, and some of them you never saw again. And then some of them, they're frequent. And then there's some of them that are just frequent flyers. They're in and out. Okay. Well, when we were in the step down, there was certain criteria that you do to get out of the step down. And the one incident I remember was, they gave me the ability to let people out, and I was the only one able to do that. Not even the warden did that. So there was criteria they did. Certain inmates worked faster than others to get out. Some were problems while they were in the step down unit, which was okay. They just stayed in there a little longer. But the one I remember specifically was he did what he needed to do to get out of the step down, and he relayed to me, I want to be out of here. I want to get back to the GP. Okay, but you got to you have to follow the rules and meet all the criteria to get out. He did that, and he got out. 2 weeks later, had a violent confrontation with him. And that was the one that I second guessed everything kind of for a while after that, because I wanted to think, okay, he slipped through the cracks. What did I miss? What didn't I say to him, or what didn't I pick up from his conversations that he was just playing me, to get back in a GP, and then this was going to happen. But come to find out, it probably really was nothing that resorted, came back to me. It more or less was the situation that he was in, and then the altercation happened. It was going to happen one way or another.
That's always a tough thing, because I remember when I got put in a position where I was the release authority. You know, you can release inmates from segregation or step downs or whatever. And, you know, these guys have been manipulating people their entire lives. And chances are they've been manipulating people the entire time they've been in prison, too. And you're sitting there looking and you're thinking, okay, they're dotting the I's, they're crossing the T's, they're obeying the rules, their bed is made, they're not causing any problems, they haven't got a disciplinary, the time that they were given to be in segregation is about to come up. You know, the good thing is there's always a committee. And even though you had the keys to that unit, there was always a committee of people who had to say, yeah, you're right, Charlie, we agree with you, this guy's coming out. And you have to just, sometimes it's a roll of the dice. And I can't say that it always comes up right, because some of those guys have just manipulated the situation to get out to do whatever. And
Sure.
that's why, you know, those committees are important, is because you get other people who look into it. And that was the value that you brought, was because you had much better, you had a keener sense of interacting with these guys and understanding what they're more than likely going to do than say I did. And that is where, you know, this whole thing in corrections is so important, because we always bounce off each other, you know.
Yeah. Yes.
And that's why there's so many different positions. That's why there's a case manager. That's why there's a health services administrator. That's why there's a nurse. That's why there's a psychologist. There's all these positions so that when we can make a decision about the inmates who are less cooperative in prison, we have different points of view and different perspectives. I've sat across the room sometimes when we're discussing whether or not a guy should get released, and you know, of the 5 people in the room to have a conversation about it, one of them is just dead set. No, this is the wrong thing, and we listen to them. And I've held guys, you know, they still had time to serve. It was, are we going to let them out early or not? I've held guys in there a little bit longer because that other person just wasn't sure, and I needed to rely upon them to give me a good advice. So I can tell you this: you were definitely a person that I count on, and I really do appreciate everything you've done, and you continue to do, because I know that you still do a lot of mentoring for people who are working in different facilities out there where you're at, and you know you're a steady voice. Heck, I've even called you at times and said, "Hey, Charlie, I got this going on. What do you have?" And I really was always appreciated your advice and your guidance on things. So, is there anything you'd like to say, like in closing?
No, we've covered a
We're
few
okay. We're
angles
all
here
right.
that were unexpected, but no, I like, I've just come away from here saying again, uh, I think this is a great opportunity for people in the facilities, whether you're in or out of corrections, with law enforcement, behind the walls, or you're done with being behind the walls. Listen to us. I think there's a lot of straight talk, a lot of raw material that's just from the heart. So I hope a lot of people listen to this and take something from it, learn something from it.
I appreciate that. And that's why it's really great. I got some people that since we started this have reached out to me, and they've had other experiences. You know, one thing I've learned is, you know, the different personalities, and we have either done things a little bit different, but we all follow the same vein. We're all kind of going the same road. We just, one person's in the left hand lane, one person's in the right hand lane. Some people hit the little bump stuff, you know, more often, like me. But there's so many great perspectives out there, and that's what this whole thing is about, is having a conversation. So I really do appreciate you sharing your experiences, and I know that as this continues and we go on, more and more is going to come out, and we'll have other things to talk about. I think on our next thing, we're going to be talking about a really, really big subject. It sounds small till you start talking about it. Then before you know it, more and more doors open up. So I look forward to getting the gang back together and having that conversation. So Charlie, as always, I want to say thank you, not only for your mentorship and the fact that you are always going to be there for me. Your friendship means the world to me. Semper Fi, brother. I look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you, Pete, and believe me, I'm looking forward to the next meeting, and also Semper Fi, my friend. Thank
All
you.
right, brother.